I was at Strange Loop and I was talking to Evan and I was asking like, how do you personally arrange modules? Like what are the size of your files generally? He's like, there's nothing wrong with having a 3,000 line file. I just looked, I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind. Ever since then, I have been writing lots of very large files.
Hey folks, welcome back to Elmtown. I'm your host, Jared M. Smith. We'll be visiting with Taylor Troesh today. But first, let's talk about our sponsor, Logistically. At Logistically, we make intuitive software to help logistics teams make better decisions and improve efficiency. Logistically pays me to record Elmtown episodes as well as pays for our production and hosting costs. We build the front end for all new features in Elm. If you're interested in our mission and enjoy writing Elm, please drop us a line, elmtown@logisticallyinc.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, let me introduce Taylor Troesh. Taylor is a developer, designer, DBA, and chaos muppet. Those are his words, to name a few. He published Surprise Talk / Elm Burma a few years ago, and an article he wrote, Why I Use Elm in 2023, was on Hacker News last year. You can check out more of his work at taylor.town. Taylor, welcome to Elmtown.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel this is kind of a match made in heaven here because we have elm.town and you have taylor.town.
The meeting of the towns.
Yes.
I think I own taylor.land and was unsure which one to pick. And I ended up going with the town.
Well, it worked out for us. There's also Elm Land, so really you could have went either way. Awesome. Okay, well, I usually like to get started by asking about how you got started in computing and programming, your kind of origin story.
Oh man, all the way back to the beginning of computing. So I thought I wanted to go into neuroscience at one point, and I ended up joining a neuroscience lab, and they're like, hey, you need to learn C++ to help out with the research. And so I did, and I was like, this is way better than biology. And so I ended up, this was back in the day of PHP and WordPress. So I ended up, while I was getting my computer science degree, made a ton of websites for people. Over time, I worked at startups and kind of progressively went more and more back end. Ended up accidentally specializing in databases, but my heart is in front end, and that's originally where I found Elm, and we'll talk about it later. But I'm back in front end, baby.
Oh yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, so you were originally interested in neuroscience and biology, and then switched over. And this kind of reminds me of when I was starting college. I was considering psychology or computer science. I was undeclared at the time, and I decided to go computer science after taking some classes, learning some programming. So it sounds like you had a similar thing where you were thinking about going a different route, but then you were like, okay, I'm getting into this. This is much cooler. What was it that brought you in when you were learning C++?
I think I really like making things, much like most programmers, right? Like we have this draw to the maker's spirit, and I think the programming community just has a lot more makers, and I very much vibed with people like producing things and making little scripts, and did not see as much of that over with the bio folks.
It seems like you would have to work a long time in that industry in order to be able to really make something.
Yeah. I remember how quickly I was able to get up and running. My first CS class was making apps in Objective-C for iOS. That was painful. I remember like almost instantly regretting my decision trying to do Objective-C because I love Swift now. Swift is very nice. Swift UI is pretty nice. Objective-C back in the day was not nice.
Sure.
So after I got over that hurdle, I was very much happy to be in the in the programming land, especially when we started getting to the functional languages. The moment I saw Lisp and a few other of the less frequently used languages, I felt very much at home.
Okay, yeah. So you were learning Lisp and you felt at home. What do you think it was about that made you feel like it was the place for you?
I do have like a strong draw to design. I really like design, things that feel designed, right? Whether or not I agree or disagree with the design decisions, it's nice to feel have something that feels thought out. And C++ Java land very much did not feel thought out. even to me, it felt like something that kind of came across by chance accident, right? Like you could feel the lots of decisions, and just like learning a language with like 9 primitives or whatever it is, just like I was like, yes, elegance.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Like the recursive ability within Lisp and that, yeah, you're taking just such a few number of concepts and being able to make big things out of it, right? And be able to create a lot with that is pretty incredible.
My finale with Lisp was I took a computational evolution class, and we had to, for the final project, make an ant, program an ant colony that's able to like find food and a few other things. But I wrote it in Lisp, and writing genetic algorithms in Lisp is so cool. If you haven't like looked it up or tried it, it's like it is the most mind-blowing thing because you can really get the feel of the code as data as code thing. And it's bananas, dude. Go check it out.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty incredible. Cool. Yeah, I have to look that up. So you're doing computational evolution. You're building sites though. You're creating things, right? You're doing this PHP and WordPress stuff. What was that? What kind of things were you making then?
Oh boy. I was working in Magento mostly, outside of just like, people's blogs and bakery sites, things like that. But then main thing I was working on was Magento, which is like this e-commerce platform. And I got really tired of the ways in which PHP broke. And so having really liked Lisp at the time, and then kind of going more into PHP, I was like, ooh, man, I do not like things breaking on me, which is, I think, how I first discovered like types and started like, I think this was right before TypeScript came out, but I started looking into Haskell and a few of those languages because I was like, I'm tired of things breaking unpredictably.
Yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. So you had encountered C++ is a statically typed language, correct? It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yes, it doesn't feel like it though, right? Like
yeah,
the types that you're using are like micro types, I guess. Like you're not using.
They're primitives, right? Is mostly what you're using. Yeah. That makes me think of, again, kind of going back, because I just recorded this episode. Sorry, we're getting more of me in here, but it makes me think of a similar thing where I had started out at Java and C# and things like that. And then I found JavaScript and I was like, oh, cool. I can do all these different things. I can code in a bunch of different ways and try out things. And I know I've said this before, but what's interesting is I didn't really appreciate the types in C# or in Java. I think for one of the reasons because it was mostly primitives, or it was you have to build out these clunky classes and inheritance models in order to actually design things that fit with your business model. So then when I found, other functional languages, like Elm primarily, then I was like, oh, okay, no, this is how I can really utilize types. So it sounds like you also had a sort of realization about types, but in a deeper way with similar languages. So you were learning Haskell, right?
I think I was poking around with Haskell and a few other languages. I think at the time I was also really interested in performance because PHP is not performant. And was kind of looking for better mental models on how to do things efficiently, especially at the time I was also working increasingly more with async architectures. And I went from the transition from callback hell into promises. This was before async await syntax, so it was promises. And I was like, this does not seem right. And so sometime around there is when I found the Elm architecture, and I was like, okay, both the types side of things and this like little magic loop runtime that is able to do things effectively on one thread, like just blew my mind. Like that was the move.
Nice. Okay, so you found Elm and the Elm architecture. Do you remember how you discovered it initially?
I don't. I think, if I remember correctly, I played around with it the first time when it still had signals in it. That was like way, way back. And the signals did not feel great to me. So then I think when it moved to the Elm architecture, right, that application loop that we're all now used to, it was an aha moment for me in how to build certain types of applications, especially ones that, you know, you have a main thread and you want to display things with that main thread, and you don't want to put HTTP requests and stuff competing with your render loop. So that was just like a big idea for me. I think I've like written a few game engines, and how to do this efficiently was always like, I've never built a game. I always got to the game engine and then stopped once it stopped after that. So I think I've been interested in this space, and yeah, just having like a very clear model was unheard of. Yeah.
Okay. Game engines. That's a lot of fun. I want to ask you about that. But this reminds me of, I was going back listening to, you had done an episode of Changelog.
Right.
Don't Make Things Worse, I believe is the name of that episode. And then I ended up listening to more Changelog episodes related to Elm, and there were a couple of them that I found. One of them included Evan, and one of the things that he said that I kind of makes me think of this is he was originally toying around with making things move on the screen, right? You know, like, okay, you have a square, now you make that square move around. And that was the initial thing that he wanted to do. And then he went and made this compiler, made this programming language. And then he was like, oh, look, now I can do that. And it's a lot less code. It's much nicer to do. I mean, like it just kind of seemed like a really long way to get around to that. But it just made me think that, yeah, you're trying to build something and then you go and build the thing underlying it, which I think is, again, you're a maker, right? You're a creator. So as you're building the thing under there, what languages were you using, these game engines?
Much later in Rust. Rust was very exciting at first, and I think I'm past the point of disillusionment with it, unfortunately. Definitely tried out some JavaScript. A lot of the stuff I wanted to do was in the browser, so it's like trying to do things efficiently without jQuery at the time, without jQuery, and without, I don't think that WebGL was even a thing in the browser back then. So I was just kind of like looking for different options, right?
Right.
Maybe it was. I don't remember. Maybe it was just not a nice experience.
Yeah, I don't remember when that came out, but yeah, okay. So you're trying to build this nice experience, and then you're making things under the hood. You don't really get around to making a game. What comes next? Where do you go from there?
I ended up working for a cryptocurrency company. This was back before, how do I put this? All the sleaze and slime got in there. I'm very much not a fan of not interested in cryptocurrency now. But at the time it was new and potentially cool. So I got to build a wallet in Elm for a company that I worked for. I think around that time is when I built the package Elm Bulma, because Bulma was a CSS framework I really liked at the time. And I wanted to have type safety with accessing all the stuff in Bulma. I, now looking back, do not think that is the move. I wish I had spent the time to like kind of make my own CSS primitives and something that's more static, because right now it's probably dead because, you know, I have to keep it synced with Bulma. Something, you know, built in Elm CSS or something like that is self-contained might have been a lot nicer.
And there's Elm UI.
I love Elm UI. Yeah. I've not got to use it in a project yet, though.
Okay.
But the mental model is just excellent. I kudos.
Yeah. Matthew Griffith's done an excellent job on that. And one of the things that I've been working on recently at work is finding a way, because we already have an existing code base with a bunch of CSS bootstrap old stuff. And then I'd initially started building out our own UI stuff and did not use Elm UI. And then recently I've been like, but I want to be able to introduce it. So I'm kind of wrapping it within that existing infrastructure. And so that is really pretty powerful, because now it has I can use all those things underneath, and it has that, you can reach into it. And a lot of it is really simple to create basically an adapter pattern for, but then I don't have to rely on the API of it, and I can sort of incrementally jump into it and use it. So it's been pretty nice so far. It's still early on, but
right.
But yeah, it's been a cool way to introduce Elm UI.
So one question for you with Elm UI. So I have two kind of ways of thinking about designing on the front end. One of them is more component based, right? And I have like a function that returns just a little snippet of some view, and that comes self-assembled with its styling. One other way that I tend to think about things when I'm, building in, plain HTML is I'm building like semantic structures, and then I'm using the CSS as queries to, at the very end, provide some coherent styling to the whole thing. I think Elm forces the first option, or at least it makes the first option very nice to use. Have you experienced this push and pull at all? Do you like using the CSS? Do you like using functions more? Seems like two good ways to do it.
Sure. Yeah, so let me see if I understand this. So the first way we'll say that is this way of containing everything within functions and making sure everything is within Elm. And then the other way being put things on the screen using basic semantic HTML, and then outside of Elm, build up CSS.
It doesn't have to be outside of Elm. It's more like, does the CSS get inlined and spread across, like put in place next to the component it's relevant to, or do you kind of just like use CSS global, from Elm CSS and just throw it all in one spot and call it a day?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I like to keep things that are functionally related as close together as possible. So I think I might think about it more in terms of that, what you're calling components, but that word, I know has a negative connotation. So
they're functions, right? They're just pure unadulterated view functions.
Yeah, right. It doesn't need to have the entire Elm architecture in order to have a view module somewhere, or a view function somewhere in some other module. And so, yeah, I prefer that, just because if I'm going to work on something, I know I can go and look in this place. And if it has other helper modules or other helper style related things, that's great. But I always know I don't have to like, okay, it's related to this thing, so I have to search this CSS class and then go find it in another file magically, or, pull in, I don't know. I just don't, I like functionally organized applications so that I can think about it in that way. But
Interesting.
yeah, it's definitely in terms of I know you have these ideas around cheap web things, right? And I think if you were to think about it in that way, you might want to have things more separated, just because then you could start with this unstyled version and make it good enough, or frugly, I believe is one of the terms that
that's a new one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you want to talk more about that?
Well, yeah, I think I didn't realize though that's why I was thinking about it, but that cheap web idea was very much like, I wish like a lot of web pages were just nice without CSS, and I could just like add my own CSS. Like I'm on it if I'm on like Reddit or Hacker News, right? Like I wish they were like less connected, so that I could just style it myself, right? So it's just like they provide the data and I can provide the styling. So I like that idea in terms of like making things cheaper. I wish the web was like that, but at the same time, it does feel nice to just program everything in line and just not give the user that choice.
Well, and you can think about it in a couple of different ways there, where if you're trying to present a web page, that is different than presenting a web application, right? That has a lot of complex stuff going on, right? And if you're building a complex web application, organizing those things around the functionality is a lot more important, because that thing could be huge, right? That's why we have single page apps. That's why we have all these different frameworks and things, is because we're building these complex systems on top of the web. But if, you're going to build a website for displaying information, right? Just sharing things, then it's not really as important.
All right.
So
fair enough. Glad to hear what the true voice of Elm says. Love it. I've got a little story for you. So, at one point in Elm, you could have custom operators, and those were, I think, the banned in like version 19 or something like that. I'm pretty sure that I'm one of the reasons they got banned. I was reading this book right here, To Mock a Mockingbird by Raymond Smullyan, and it's about combinators. I made this awful combinator library with the absolute worst operators. It was kind of a joke, and just kind of like a way to learn. But this thing was unholy, and it was like shortly after that custom operators went away. So I feel personally responsible. I'm sorry to all of you who miss out on that feature.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting. Let's dive in a little bit more. What were you making? What were some of these operators? What do they look like?
Oh, dude, I need to what was it called? It was called Elm Pointless. Let me find it real quick. So I even had like a I created all these dumb terms like flargs, and you had like multiple A's in it to denote how many, like what order the combinator was in. It was just so bad. I need to find this thing and send it to you. Maybe we could put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll do. Interesting. Okay. So you feel responsible for that not being there. But I think, generally thinking about custom operators and as we were talking about CSS and kind of relating to or style and how you find things, right? One of the things that is maybe part of the motivation for that, or as I understand to be part of the motivation for that. I'm not officially the voice of Elm in any way, but from my perspective, I see the custom operators, of course, yeah, you can kind of abuse them in that way, but then just the discoverability, right? You know, as we were talking about organizing things in terms of their function, seeing something that's been exposed within a module and it doesn't have a name, right? Like, do you know to go look that could be a custom thing? Or if you're new to the language and you see Elm pointless stuff in there and it's, you know, a lot of these operators and you're like, I better go ask about this on the Slack, or I better go to Stack Overflow or wherever that person, you know, they use Google or DuckDuckGo or Kagi, you know.
Yeah.
They are trying to discover the source of that. And when it's a bunch of symbols, right? Maybe that's less likely to go look and, is that imported? I don't know.
Oh yeah. Like, I very much agree with the decision. Like, that was one of the things I hated about Haskell. This was a little learning experience for me. So I have no hard feelings about them being removed because I do. The only operators I was like scared to lose was the parse and keep. I make a lot of parsers and I love having the little visual indicators in the pipeline. Absolutely love those. I'm glad those didn't go. All the rest, I'm glad they're gone.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Those are nice. So yeah, a little bit can go a long way, and custom operators, really cool. So you were using Elm as a way to build out this product, right? You were talking about the wallet that you were making in Elm.
Right. Security is a big thing in the whole blockchain world. So that was, I remember like going to the CEO and being like, okay, we currently have this thing in React. I'm like, look how many lines of code that we have to trust. And we're using like 60 packages. I'm like, this is non-viable. I was like, this is not secure. So I made like a little iframe thing in Elm, and it was like, we could inspect every single line of code in the whole thing, all the packages. I think there was one package we used. It's just such a huge value add to be like, hey, this thing is probably very secure because there's no weird code running in there. So that was how I was actually able to sell it, and it happened to also be just way snappier. Like, everyone was very happy with the end result compared to what we had at the time.
Nice, cool. So you were using Elm and you were building this stuff, and then what happens next? Where do you go from there?
I think I had one React job, decided I was never going to write React again, and then ended up getting a job as a database person. I was managing a database that ingested all of the songs and videos on the entire internet in real time. That was very stressful. Yeah,
Whoa.
it was crazy scale. That was a giant distributed Postgres database. The Postgres database held all of the metadata. So things like how many likes, what's the title of this stuff. We had we used Foundation DB for the fingerprint data because this was a video analysis company. But my Postgres was my baby, and that was stressful.
Wow. Okay, so that's a bit of a shift. You shift out of the front end at that point, right? Now you're doing back end. You're doing all the way to the back.
Yeah.
And
yeah, all the way to the back. That was a major jump. I think building up the knowledge of types was extremely helpful for being able to do database schemas. I also had like a bunch of experience with making things performant. So, understanding how the CPU works and how these pages are being arranged on disk is essential. But like having that functional mindset of what's valid and what's not, I think was extremely helpful for architecting the next giant, the next wave of products that they made. Inherited a very big, ugly, scary database and got to architect one after that.
Okay. Yeah, I see. All right. So front end to back end, working on databases, architecting. What's this about the Great Wall of Code? You had said to ask you about that.
Oh, yeah, the Great Wall of Code. Okay. So it is something. It was actually around that time because I was writing a ton of SQL. SQL doesn't really modularize, right? Like you just write one big, ugly, like 1,000-line SQL query, and that thing is just runs until you change the underlying table. But I remember I was at Strangeloop and I was talking to Evan, and I was asking like, hey, how do you personally arrange modules? Like what are the size of your files generally? And he's like, there's nothing wrong with having a 3,000-line file. I just looked, I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind. Ever since then, I have been writing lots of very large files. Now, I don't think he was recommending to do a large file. I think his advice was like, hey, do what makes sense. There's no pressure at any point to like split the file. Like you'll kind of know when to split it. And ever since that, and with the SQL experience, I've just been kind of like not breaking things apart unless I need to, and it's been great. It's been absolutely the right move. I just have these big, giant, nested things, and it's okay. Like I don't need to add and remember variable names to everything and put things in modules. So I call that the Great Wall of Code because for a few personal projects I've brought in some friends and they're like, what is this giant file? Like it's the Great Wall of Code. The major thing that convinced me was how much easier it is to refactor when you don't have module boundaries to renegotiate. If you get those module boundaries wrong in the beginning, like moving things around is just a pain. You've got the mental model all wrong. So I just, tend to stack things until I can't stack them. And I'm like, oh yeah, like now is the time to break things out.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a video about that Evan gave a presentation, The Life of a File, I believe it is, where he talks about that particular idea. And yeah, that's one that is always a struggle for people coming from, I think, languages like JavaScript, right? Where if you don't break things up as quickly as possible, it becomes difficult to manage because you have state that can, get out here and get out there, and
right.
and it's hard to find references and things like that. But yeah, when you're using Elm, then you have those boundaries, but they're, like you said, they're not as strict as if you then break them out into modules and separate things before you've really settled on, is this the same or is it similar or is it unique? Those type of questions. Yeah. So
I was, so my friend, he likes teasing me about Elm because he just doesn't understand. He's a very good React programmer. And I think he's like curious about this whole world because I make a lot of claims, that like, I don't know. It just, so for instance, he's like, how's the new job? I'm working an Elm job now. And I'm like, oh, it's great. Like I have a single 2,000 line view function that I have to worry about right now. That's it. That's like it. And he's like, oh, that sounds terrible. I'm like, I was like, it's just one file. Like, I only have to worry about one file. Everything is like very easy to decode because you could just go in and look visually at where things are nested, right? And I was like, would you rather have one 1,800 line function, or would you rather have like 1,800 one-line functions? I was like, and he's like, actually, yeah, and we did chat a little bit about like, what's the right size for a function. I think he ended up saying that he'd rather have 18 100 line functions. And I'm like, nah, I haven't convinced him yet.
Well, those functions could be in the same module still.
He could not believe that like the app that I'm working on fit into 1,800 lines, because I sent him screenshots and he's like, oh, we're like, I was like, I can't send you the code because it's like, private, proprietary, but like, trust me, it's only 1,800 lines, the whole stinking thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So yeah, you brought up that you are now working on the front end again. You're back in Elm. So we didn't talk much about kind of your writing. But yeah, I know you've been doing a lot of that recently. And then now you're doing this Elm job. That's really exciting. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah. So I think before I get into this Elm job portion, I want to say that that DB experience that I had, I think is underrated. I think more people in front end should move into back end or vice versa. I've been, how do I put this? What's the movie where they have the space, the astronauts, but they need to get miners and they need to send the miners out to the asteroid to kill it because they can't, because it's easier to teach miners to be astronauts than vice versa? That's the whole premise of the film. I think it's Armageddon, but
Armageddon, yes, that's it. Yep.
So that's how I feel about this experience with the database thing, where it's like, I think it's easier to teach a front end person with good taste, how to think about performance and schema stuff than vice versa, right? It's anyway, sorry. So I think more people, more front end folks should really think about databases. I've been doing like a little bit of consulting after the database job, and there's so many companies that literally their whole problem is that a non-front end person designed the database, and they just get in these Figma doom loops because the person on the database could not conceive of what the product might need. And so I really do think that front end people are like very much undervalued in the database space because they can anticipate what's needed and just prevent so many unnecessary migration changes and updates. So I've been helping companies recently design things in such a way that they won't have to redesign them for the front end, and that's been fantastic. I wish more I wish more Elm folks would help me in the database land. It's been great.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, that's good advice. So learning kind of in this way, I consider it kind of full stack, right? You're kind of learning what happens on the other side as opposed to only knowing one half of the side. Now, you're saying it might be easier to teach. Why do you think that is?
I think especially with the Elm folks, they understand the importance of state, and they understand the transformation and the holding of state and how that can be a problem and how to respect it and treat it with care. I think a lot of those values, especially for the Elm people, are very good for understanding how to make databases that don't need to be changed later. In the reverse, you take an average DBA and try to teach him CSS, and he's like, forget it, man. He's just absolutely no. And yeah, so I think that's the asymmetry there is you have one group that really cares about state, and then another that doesn't tend to care about design. And the state side is just so important. All the stuff in between personally doesn't matter that much. Like between the everything between the front end and the database tends not to matter that much to me, because it would take it for an average company. It would take me, I don't know, a weekend with GPT to switch from Go to Rust or any of those. Like you're just moving data around. It doesn't tend, unless you have like some secret sauce algorithms that are doing stuff outside the database. It's generally pretty easy to grok. It's that holding of the state that ends up causing a lot of people problems.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. And that makes sense. So thinking about it in terms of design, this makes me think about a question I had about you on your blog. It says you write about learning. And as someone who has thought in design thinking and has done front end and then had to go learn this database stuff, do you have any thoughts on how people could approach that better? What ways could influence how they think about it?
I, like many other engineers, am prone to Wikipedia spirals. Like these Wikipedia things. I have found pretty much all of those to be wastes of time in retrospect for the most part. Most of my really good learning has come from just doing things, right? Like, hey, I want to make this, and then just kind of figuring out how to do it with no experience. A subset of that is I landed a few jobs because I was a little overconfident in what I could do, and then I had to get my catch my skill set up. I think not enough people are willing to put themselves in positions where they need to learn something. Highly recommend that, right? Like, tell somebody you're going to do something and then do it.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a way of kind of putting yourself into a position that is a forcing function for the learning.
100%. Yeah. Huge believer in forcing functions. Huge believer in pairing your learning experiences with deliverables, like having an output that you want to work toward. For instance, like I've been trying to learn Spanish for a while, and it's like impossible because I don't want to use Spanish for anything, so I always just put it to the side. But for instance, if I was like, oh hey, I want to go to like Peru in 2026, and like I bought a plane ticket, right? It would make it real, right? Like it would make this experience of like, oh hey, I get to learn Spanish so that I can go do this thing. Makes it like a real experience. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to go to Peru. But like, yeah, I think that's the gist of my learning strategy.
Yeah, those are good things. Yeah, I've thought about that too. What can I do to force me to learn something? And I've traveled a little bit and learned German in college, and so I went to a summer program in Germany, and that was good, except that when you go to somewhere, and this was a college town, so they were all eager to learn, but they wanted to learn English. So they were ready to practice their English with me, which made it more difficult for me to practice my German. But I was thinking, well, maybe with something like Spanish, it's, I can try to teach a class on programming in Spanish, and then I may not have the everyday language, but at least it'll force me to take an existing set of knowledge and apply that in this foreign language. So
I just finished reading Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. Excellent, hilarious read. Just a whole bunch of stories from this crazy Nobel Prize winning physicist. He's excellent. One of them though is him talking about him learning Portuguese and then teaching, like within like 2 or 3 months, like he's teaching physics classes in Brazil in Portuguese. And yeah, it's a great one. Look it up.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds cool. And it sounds like he's using that, right? By creating that forcing thing that says, okay, if I'm going to be able to teach this, I have to really understand it. So yeah.
Okay. So, okay. Back to your original question about the new Elm job. I now get to work in Elm full time, for a company called Replenysh. I love their mission for sustainability, and they're in SoCal, which is like double great for me because I live in SoCal. And what they do is they work with logistics. Sounds like something down your alley. They work with technology and logistics to build a circular supply chain. The whole thing is like, let's not put things in landfills and make it economically viable to do so. So they work with a ton of different clients, just like, hey, let's get our aluminum back into the factory, right? And that is it is insane to me how that's not like already a thing. Like, yeah, like so these companies, why aren't they trying to get their materials back?
Yeah. Well, that's great news. Yeah, I really like that concept, and it does seem once you say it, it seems like, yeah, why don't they do that? It makes me think of something that my partner, my wife Bryn, she had come up with, and she was talking about how she learned that when there was starting to be a lot of like trash bags that had companies' names, or like, you know, Coke cans that have Coca-Cola on it, it was a bad image for the company. But instead of taking the responsibility for cleaning that up, they try to make individuals feel more responsible about it, and like change the messaging that, you know, it is your responsibility as an individual, which of course it is, right? But that was the alternative way. It's like, well, it doesn't cost us if we just, you know, make them feel bad about creating trash in the world, right? So, yeah. And then it gets cleaned up.
Right now, it is cheaper for a given company. It's cheaper for a given company to make you feel bad about them not doing their job, right? Like they can hire PR folks. Right now, it's cheaper for them to hire PR folks than to actually get their materials back. And Replenysh is trying to change that. So I'm like all about it. Very, very happy. And their whole stack is Elm and PostgreFile, like it's a whole GraphQL thing. The whole thing is based on Nix packages. It's just functional all the way down. I am elated. It feels so nice. Everything just works. I'm just so very happy like to be working on this, because the person who architected this was just 100,000 IQ. It's just so good.
Nice. Well, congratulations. I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that, and that it is, you know, something that is really going to, I hope, have a positive impact on the world, and and kind of make it viable for them to do so. So yeah, if you can create the incentive, then that's why they want to do that. That's great. So yeah, we're nearing the end here, and I know there's so much. We talked about this before we started. I get on your website, taylor.town, and I start reading things, and I go down these different paths, and I'm like, oh, there's so much good stuff here. The writing, it's smart, it's funny, and it's deep, and I really recommend that folks go check that out. So, but I wanted to talk about a couple of these because I just thought they were neat ideas. One of them is this article called "Why I Didn't Play This Harpsichord Sooner." Do you want to?
Ooh, Yeah, that's a good one.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So that one was an unusual piece. I don't know. I've been trying to learn how to talk about things more personally. I think in school they teach you to write yourself out of all of the essays, right? You're supposed to be this non-biased observer. I think I've been trying to unlearn a lot of that. And the harpsichord one came from a simple question I asked: why don't more people have personal websites? And I replied with that question on Hacker News, and I got a bunch of replies. None of them felt quite right, because I think they were right in that it is a technological problem. I was more interested in why aren't more people interested in creating things? And I kind of thought about myself, and I only really recently started shipping things and creating things in earnest. I did a lot of Wikipedia rabbit holes for a while, and I kind of compared that experience growing up in a very conservative group where everybody played music, and it felt weird to me going to Los Angeles and observing that, oh yeah, there's actually fewer people, the average, there on average fewer musicians than I had grown up around, and that felt weird. And I don't know, there's an interesting parallel though for websites that I'm unsure about still, but there's a parallel there.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess what I liked about it was you created this metaphor, right, of this harpsichord for whatever your creative outlet is, right? Like, why don't people, that's the way I read it anyway, is why don't people have and actually, actively work on their creative output. But I like that you mentioned this in terms of your own personal experience, and in terms of, I know you have a couple of different terms here. The candid culture is one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. And then, of course, going back to Hunter S. Thompson, gonzo journalism, that's a good one that I think is really helpful because, and again, before we started here, one of the things that I like about Elmtown is we talk about people's personal experiences, right? We talk about their struggles, what their motivations are, and like how to overcome and why people are in the Elm community, right? So I think that if you don't have that part, then there's a missing connection, right? With that drive, these are the things. And sometimes you want to do that, right? Sometimes you just want to state the facts because it is so polarized that if you try to weave in some, politically charged thing, then the message is lost, right? But
Right.
But if you personalize it, right, and you bring it down to, well, if you look at what a person is thinking about, they're not thinking about this rhetoric or that rhetoric or this line. They're just thinking about what are the problems I'm trying to solve? What did I struggle with? How did I get through? And, and then I think that there's something real that comes out of that people connect with. So yeah, I really appreciate you creating that your harpsichord, right, and playing your harpsichord. So
thanks. It took a while. Had a lot of for anybody that is disappointed with or feels behind. I think feeling behind seems to be an increasingly common experience, and there's ways out. I don't know how I got out, but I got out. I was feeling behind all the time, and now I don't feel that way anymore. It's great. But I don't know if anybody has the answer for that, please write about it and publish it online, because so many people feel this way, and there doesn't seem to be any good, good advice.
Sure. Okay. Well, maybe we'll find something that you've written in the future more about that too. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to lead any.
I've tried.
Anything,
I have not been able to figure that one out. And I don't know. I feel like somebody that's in it needs to do it, because I think I also think with a lot of these advice, I try to stay away from writing about advice stuff, because I think we do things and then the problem is solved, and then in retrospect we're like, oh, it must have been this thing that I did. And I think we're kind of just making things up a lot.
Of course. Yeah.
So like you said, it's like it's kind of better just to talk about the personal experience, the story, and not try to overprescribe. I really like writing in like a imperative tone though, so it's problematic for me because it's just so hard to write without. If you couch everything in I believe it's just not good writing. Like it feels so watered down, but at the same time, like I'm not very confident in pretty much anything. I'm like very not confident, at least with like my knowledge and opinions and stuff. Confident that I can figure things out. Not very confident in having them figured out already.
Yeah.
So
good distinction.
So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any advice on that front too. I'd appreciate it. The writing forcefully is scary, but I have not found any other solutions.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Because for me, when I journal, it helps because, and I do the same thing where I do it in the imperative, but when I'm saying you, I'm talking about me, but it helps me to also gain some perspective by not saying I. So it allows me to kind of take a step back away from it. And then when I go back to reread it, then it can be a bit prescriptive. It can be, you need to do, not necessarily you need to, but like, you thought this, or you're going to do this, your principles are whatever, right? Like when I write like that and I go back and read it, I can more likely, I feel like, and this is just, maybe I'm just doing it and it just happens to be that way. But it feels like that disconnect between it is me and it's some actions I want to take or something that I think is useful right now. It is a nice distinction for me. So I don't
Love
know,
it.
maybe that's all right. Well, we're at an hour here. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get to picks?
Oh, before picks, I don't think I've. Trying to think. Just go read Taylortown.
Yeah, okay.
That's about it.
All right, fair enough. Well, Taylor, what picks do you have for us today?
All right. Before, just for a little insider baseball, before we recorded the episode, he was like, "Do you have any picks?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can't think of any." He's like, "Oh, maybe you'll think of some along the way." I've got so many from this conversation. First one, a book called Cradle to Cradle. Very good book about sustainability from like a chemical perspective. Like that was the mind-blowing thing for me. Was it wasn't really a book on let's say it wasn't just like moral and like theoretical things. It was like it's somebody with like a very strong chemical science background. What is the word I'm looking for? Material science. So very good. Cradle to Cradle. Very good book. I think I also want to recommend A Timeless Way of Building by Christopher Alexander. I recently stumbled upon this book, and it's about like building architecture, like house architecture, but it's also very much not, and kind of mind-blowing, some of the concepts in there. If you're interested in design and design systems, highly recommend that one. What else? I highly recommend the Elmtown podcast. Elmtown is excellent. And they are very kind for having me on.
Well, thank you. You didn't have to say that. I appreciate it.
That's one of my picks, dude. You have to live with it.
All right. Anything else?
I think my parting words for our audience today is go forth and build that great wall of code.
Yes. I love it. Great wall of code. Yeah, excellent. Okay. Good picks. And I just have 2 picks today. The first one is I was creeping on your music history and review some music on your blog and saw that you listened to some vaporwave. You had some cyber reality in there. And so there's one that I recommend called Enmesh. It's actually someone from Louisville, Kentucky, which is near me. His name's Alex Koenig, but goes by Enmesh. That's the letter N, M-E-S-H. And some of the titles are explicit. So, if that's not your cup of tea, then don't look it up. But if that's okay, then there's usually not lyrics. So it's vaporwave. It's just something that I like to code to and keeps me stimulated as I'm working. So that's my non-Elm related pick. And the other one is, if this is you listening to Elmtown and you're not using Elm yet, as this is how one of the ways that I got started was I listened to a lot of what was going on in the Elm realm before I started becoming an Elm programmer. So I recommend the official Elm guide. One of the things that I mentioned on here was us talking about how to break things apart, and of course the Great Wall of Code. But one of the things that Evan has in that official guide is thinking about the same versus similar versus unique. And that is just one of a very succinct guide. It's not like you have to read a whole lot to get through it, but there's a lot of cool things in there. And so if you're getting started, that's a great place to go.
Dude, I'm a veteran and I need to learn that.
I go back to it for sure. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with going back and kind of emptying your cup and starting.
Oh, the empty cup. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
And build up your wall of code. So, yeah. I just want to say thanks to all the folks listening out there. Please rate and share if you're enjoying the show. And thanks, Taylor, for coming downtown.
Thank you.